Thank you very much, and I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of the Maynooth University Library to the first event in Heritage Week, and it's great to see so many people here, and hopefully we'll be seeing you again during the week. So it's a real treat for all of us having Dr. Paul Sheridan talk to us this morning about the college chapel, and in fact this event was so popular that we're repeating it on Wednesday evening. Enough spaces. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Dr. Sheridan, and then at the end, as Elaine said, there will be time for questions, so you can put them in the chat box or you can wait till the end where we'll call for questions as well. So okay, thanks very much.
Great, thanks very much, Helen, and thanks, Elaine. So I'm just going to share the screen. Now, can you does everyone see that okay? Okay, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna drop that and throw that up here. So sorry, I've left last year's date on it. Apologies. Anyway, let's move on. And so some of you will know the college chapel at Manuth. And some of you have seen it in pictures or on television, indeed, or wherever. And it is, you know, kind of it's an incredible building. It's incredible for many different reasons. One, because it has been, I suppose, the heart and the lifeblood of the college since its building, and but also because it's such an iconic building and filled with incredible amounts of detail. It speaks to a particular time in Irish history for many different reasons, not only in terms of the fact of the chapel being built in the first place, but also in terms of the art, the architecture, and all these other things. So if you look at the first slide there, well, the first slide was that design there on the right-hand side is actually part of the floor just outside the college chapel, the main entrance. But anyway, this is a particular slide is part of the plan that Pugin had for the building of the chapel. Now you'll see it's very different. This is from a much bigger plan that was it can be seen in Healy's Centennial History. But I've just focused on I suppose the Pugin sort of section there at the beginning. You'll see that you'll recognize the front, what we call the President's Arch, for those of you who are familiar with the college, the President's Arch, and then sort of just below it then on the left-hand side, you'll see what is Pugin Hall, which is the main dining hall. And then over the other side, you'll see there on the right, a chapel and a very modest tower and spire. And that was the original plan that it was intended for this particular site. And then you notice at the back a building connecting it, which was to be the Aula Maxima. So what he built basically, or what he designed basically, Pugin, was a complete quadrangle with the chapel and the Aula Maxima making up the fourth side, and the cloister that's there at the moment. However, in the history of the college, when the money was given for the completion of the buildings that Pugin was supposed to build, they were only told they could have £30,000, which is a lot of money. It's, you know, it's the equivalent of somewhere between 20 and 30 million today, but it was still not enough to complete a chapel. So now Pugin was quite annoyed about this because he was, you know, Pugin was a master of the complete design. Some of you will be familiar with Pugin's buildings, the cathedral in Enniscorthy, my own diocese, and the cathedral in Killarney. He did work for quite a number of churches in the Diocese of Ferns, in Wexford, Barntown, and he did, where else? And Breve, a number of, and in Gorey. But he also did work for the Duke of Devonshire in Lismore Castle. He did a number of other projects. The most recognizable project that he was involved in was the Palaces of Westminster in London. He was involved in part of the decoration and part of the design of the buildings. And actually, if you look at the design if you're ever, God forbid, having to watch BBC Parliament, if you see any of those committee rooms, you'll see designs and colours that are similar to those that are used in parts of St. Patrick's. But anyway, I digress. So Pugin wanted to build this as it was. It was one that he had done in Ushaw, which is in the north of England, which is now part of the University of Durham. He had done something similar there, four sides with a chapel and an aula sort of back to back. However, it wasn't to be. And this was the McCarthy plan. J.J. McCarthy was the first architect first professor of ecclesiastical architecture in the New Catholic University, the one that had been founded by John Henry Newman. This is the chapel as you would see it today, with the spire, the tower, and the chapel as it is. You'll see St. Patrick's there, and you'll see the back. Just to one side of the spire there, you'll see the back of St. Mary's, which is not exactly the way it is, but anyway, it was the way it was intended to be, but it didn't happen in the end. The building didn't kind of, if you like, turn a corner. They didn't build the Aula Maxima there. Anyway, so this is the building. So let's have a look at some of the timelines. It was originally intended that Charles Russell, who was president of Manuth, mooted the idea of a college chapel. Now, the reason being is because he wanted one place in the college where the entire college community could come together. Now, Pugin's son had written a number of times stating that his firm should undertake the chapel as his father had not been paid for a design that he had submitted. Interestingly enough, letters have in the archive have sort of come to light about how would I say this? The Archbishop of Dublin, the great Paul Cardinal Cullen, advising the president of Maynooth not to employ the Pugins as the sort of the second generation of architects. Apparently, they were quite pushy. Apparently, they were quite. There's an account even that Cullen gives of them literally accosting one of the sons, accosting a parish priest on a railway platform, saying, "Look, I've given you these designs. Why aren't we proceeding?" and all the rest of it. So he recommended that they go elsewhere. So they went to J.J. McCarthy. Now, McCarthy has quite a number of buildings around Ireland, and that particular style of architecture, which was neo-Gothic, very much in the style of Pugin, but different in a certain extent. You could say that the St. Patrick's, where the President's Arch there is, that is kind of neo-Gothic in 12th century style. And then the College Chapel is neo-Gothic in a kind of a 13th century style. The contract was awarded to Thomas Hammond of Drogheda, and the foundation stone was laid in 1875. Interestingly, a lot of the stone that for the College Chapel came from a quarry near Athy, where Thomas Hammond had owned a quarry. It's just significant to me because my first parish, when I was ordained first, was actually, I spent 3 years in Athy. Now, so in 1877, Russell suffers a debilitating fall from his horse and is succeeded by William Walsh in 1880 and then Robert Brown in 1885. And I suppose Brown was the one that was instrumental in the completion of the chapel in terms of its decoration. In 1881, the architect's certificate of completion is issued by McCarthy's son, Charles. Interestingly enough, if you know the campus, the Aula Maxima, which is over to one side of the College Chapel, the Aula Maxima was the McCarthys tendered for that particular building, but it was actually given to the next architect down the line, who was William Hague. We'll come to him in a few minutes. And the McCarthys sued the college, claiming that, you know, as the Pugins' sons had done, that, you know, it was pretty much in the bag and they were supposed to get it. But anyway, it may have been that they thought that the building that they that their father had tailed on to the end of St. Mary's there over by the spire was what they were intending to build there. But anyway, such are the vagaries of architects and all the rest of it. So this is Charles Russell, president, 1857 to 1880, as I said, died. You know, quite an academic, you know, thinker, brilliant mind, and all the rest of it. He was also a very, very good friend with John Henry Newman, or St. John Henry Newman, as he's now known. And Newman states in his apologia that it was Russell who was most responsible for his conversion to Catholicism, basically by leaving him alone, which sounds like a very Irish way of doing conversion. But anyway, they corresponded, and when Newman visited the college, he visited to see Russell. Charles Russell's nephew, as you'll see him on the other side, was Lord Chief Justice of England and first Roman Catholic to serve as Lord Chief Justice since the Reformation, and they're his dates as well. So he came from a noble family. So a couple of timelines in terms of now the first ceremonies took place in the chapel was the priestly ordinations in 1890, and that took place on 24th of June. It was consecrated then in 1881 on the 24th of June, and then it was pretty much ready for the centennial of the college in 1895, because once the exterior, the McCarthy Chapel had been done, they needed it needed to be completed in terms of the interior, and this architect William Hague was appointed. And interestingly enough, if you look at Monaghan Cathedral, St. McCarthy's Cathedral in Monaghan, that was a McCarthy church, which was actually finished by Hague. And there are a couple of others, projects that McCarthy started and Hague finished. So, and then it was thought, Logue, who was Cardinal Archbishop of Armagh at the time of the centennial of the college, suggested that the commemoration of the centennial of the college's foundation should be marked by the building of a tower and a spire to the college chapel. Principally because if you think about it, you know, at the centennial at the time of the foundation of the college in 1795, there was still quite a number of the penal laws still on the statute books, including the fact that you could not put a tower or a spire on a Catholic church, and in many places you couldn't build a Catholic church on a main street in a town, which is interesting when you see that Maynooth College, you know, forms one end of the town of Maynooth, Carton the other end, whereas the parish church down around the corner. And that happened in many, many churches around Ireland. They weren't allowed to be built on main streets or main squares or things like that. So he thought it would be a good idea that a tower and a spire would complete it. Now, he thought it was a good idea, but of course didn't give them any money for it. The new reredos, which we'll come to as we go along, was constructed from money left in the will of Gerard Malloy. Now, Gerard Malloy was a former professor of the college and then rector of the Catholic University. And it was completed and consecrated by Daniel Mannix, who was Archbishop of Melbourne. And he was president of the college before that and was consecrated Archbishop of Melbourne, or coadjutor Archbishop of Melbourne in the college chapel, one of a number of episcopal ordinations that have happened in the chapel. 1814 was the completion of the Lady Chapel, and then the final thing, I suppose, in 1927 was the ceiling decorated by J. Clark and Sons. J. Clark and Sons as being the business owned at that point in 1927 by Harry Clark and his brother. And you'll see, I'll show you evidence of that a little while. So that's more or less the timeline. I can't see the side. So Elaine, if there's any questions as I'm going along, maybe you just holler out if anyone's got any questions as we go along, but we'll hopefully leave time for questions at the end. Now, so this is the picture that you see on the bottom left hand side is the college chapel as it appeared in Healy's history. Healy's history, which is the centennial history of the college, was in 1895. So obviously the chapel, the spire hadn't been finished at that stage. And there's some of the benches which we'll come across in a few minutes. This is a photograph which was taken, they reckon, around 1902 or 1903. And you can see that there's quite a difference between the lower part of the tower and the upper part of the tower and the spire, because it was only recently finished. It shows the back of the college and also the handball alleys. That's one from the college archive. So let's go into the chapel. This is the door. Interestingly enough, and I've been saying this constantly to one of the grants people in the college, that the doors are actually on wrong. They're actually back to front. When you approach the college chapel, these are the doors as you see them, but they actually should be facing the other way. So it should say, as you approach the doors, Domus Dei, House of God, Porta Coeli, Gate of Heaven. Anyway, my pleadings to move the doors so far have landed on deaf ears. So anyway, we'll see what happens. So it is as you see it on a particularly good day, with the sun streaming in, and this is it from the other end. So let you have a look at those for a second. And I don't know how many times I've entered those doors at this stage, but that view never ceases to take my breath away. As often as I've seen it, as often as I've shown people around it, as often as I've been there as a celebrant at Mass, or whatever, it still takes my breath away. So here's a letter, by the way. This is from, I just thought I'd show you this. This is from the college, from the Russell Library. It's a letter from Monsignor Brown, to Monsignor Brown from William Hague. And it is part of a considerable correspondence that the two men had sort of back and forward. I spent kind of most of the morning this morning, sort of answering emails back and forward. You know what happens? You answer an email and then another one comes in and back and forward like this. These men sometimes were conversing back and forward, sometimes twice and three times a day, in the days when there was more than just the one post. I have your two letters this morning, which with check for Brian Monan, which I have given him, and enclose your certificate with receipt attached. Monan was the carver who carved the furniture that's in the sacristy, not the actual. There's a big controversy about, not controversy, just a disagreement as to whether the Monan family had carved the pews in the college chapel, or whether it was a company called Connolly's from Dublin. Monans were from RD. We reckon, because Monans actually signed, there's a little brass plaque on the benches in the sacristy, which proved that Monans did those and Connolly's did the other. So anyway, so this is, this considerable correspondence that went back and forward. So let's look at the details. This is the floor. The floor was made by Buck Brothers of Paris and London. And on the floor it says, Laudate pueri Dominum, salite Deo, salite quoniam rex omnis Deus, salite sapienter. Young men praise the Lord, sing praise to God, praise him, for God is King of all the earth, praise him wisely. And that gives us one of the themes, if you like, the iconographical themes that run through the design of the chapel. So you see the angel there on the left-hand side, who has this scroll saying Laus Deum, in the praise of God. So firstly, it's the praise of God, and then the other sort of iconographical theme, meaning, when I say the iconographical theme, I mean the sort of the unifying theme that sort of goes through the various decorations in the chapel. We'll see that as we go along. So the praise of God is the first one, and obviously the second one is the formation of men for the priesthood. So I see someone wanting to measure. So now And this is some of the decoration. When you go back to earlier on, these are photographs I took myself. It's amazing what you can do with an iPhone. And you see the colors. Those kind of dark greens, kind of russets and reds and blues, and they're very, very reminiscent of the colors used by Pugin, because they were colors that were popular. And when it came to the decoration, Haig did sort of go to the sort of colors that might have been used for the colors that might have been used in kind of a neo-Gothic church of that time. I'm sure many of you have seen colors similar to those in churches designed around the same time, but they make for a beautiful kind of decoration. They actually make for a beautiful wallpaper on your computer, but also they make for how would I say it? It's, you know, you'll see. Yeah, the one thing I was going to say was that, which I didn't mention earlier on, is the chapel had a massive restoration before the bicentennial in 1995. So I say to visitors that the chapel, I was there as a student from 1983 to 1986, and the chapel never looked as good then as it does now, because of the as I said, a massive renovation that was done, and a lot of this work was renewed and a lot of it was restored, and all the rest of it. So again, some more of that decoration, and then you can see the detail in even some of the tiniest of things. That's just a little stone flower for part of one of the pillars, and then the mosaic, which is just outside the door of the chapel. The SP obviously standing for St. Patrick. Those beautiful brasses on the doors which you go into the chapel, and you can see some of the pillars there, some of the decoration. So a huge amount of work was put into it, and a huge amount of care in terms of how things would look in the chapel, as it would be in any church. See, remember as well, you know, in terms of Pugin's design, in terms of Haig, in terms of Hammond, who was the builder, in terms of the fellows putting in the boilers, the lighting, all the rest of it, you know, do this job well. There was 400 or 500 seminarians sitting in these seats who would be eventually parish priests and curates, and would be needing to build and renovate and you know, churches. So you had a pretty much a good audience, and as the college records show, you know, the archive around the college chapel, every piece for this chapel was very, very hotly contested. So you'll see estimates, you know, we beg to offer and we beg to suggest or whatever, you know, there's sort of tenders for, you know, the heating system and things like that. And it was a major piece of work, because, you know, from that time after Catholic emancipation right through was one of the largest periods of church building in Ireland, which made the building of this chapel sort of even sort of more amazing from the point of view that, you know, if you take from Catholic emancipation, you know, up until the famine, and then after the famine up until the end of the century, I suppose, was the largest period of church building in Ireland. And not only churches, but also schools and hospitals, and, you know, the rise of the religious congregations and orders who were either founded in Ireland or coming to Ireland and all the rest of it. So it was a period of great growth in that sense. And then, you know, the period up to Catholic emancipation with O'Connell and the Catholic movement and that, all of those, the Catholic Association, I should say, all of those were, you know, this chapel was built from the pennies of the poor. It was built from collections. It was built from donations from, you know, not only here in Ireland, but also abroad as well. Now, I just thought I'd show you this. This is from the archive, and it's one of Haig's designs, or Haig's designs, I should say, for the Tribune, which is over the door that I showed you a second ago into the college sacristy. There is a balcony, and the balcony was used by staff, you know, maybe someone who was infirm and couldn't get to, you know, couldn't get to celebrate or couldn't get to mass. It was also used, they say, for when families came for funerals. the funerals of their sons, because as anyone walking around Maynooth, you know, sort of in sort of the wet and miserable months, knows that there's a fog that descends on Maynooth. Maynooth was rife with tuberculosis for many years, and that was why the senior infirmary was built, and also built in the manner in which it was built, with these kind of long windows. And it was also designed by McCarthy. So and that's where families were, if you came for your son's or your relation's funeral. But you see the beauty of the details on that particular plan, and there are a number of them in the chapel. Let's move on to the woodwork. The wood is done, or the carving in the chapel is done in American oak. Now, I have it on good authority from a friend of mine who is a master cabinet maker, that American oak is a very difficult wood to work. It's almost as hard as one of the hardwoods like mahogany or teak or that. So it gives a kind of a realization that the work that's done is of a huge and very, very high standard, but also you know, it shows a great skill. These are a number of the details from the stalls. There are 454 individual stalls, and as I said, there's details in that. Behind, you'll see there's a statue of a saint. He's holding a church, which means he's the founder of a church or a founder of a diocese, and behind it you'll see part of the coat of arms of the Diocese of Ireland, which are on the back panels of the walls. We'll see it in a bigger picture in a minute. And then at the very bottom, just as you go out the door, you'll see the emblems of the four evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you'll see them there. Now, this is interesting. You see the quotation, "This work is to be a pleasure to be able to this work, it is a pleasure to be able to state, has been done in the city of Dublin, the contractor being Messrs. Connolly and Son of Dominic Street." And that's from an account of the chapel's consecration in the national press on the 25th of June in 1891. So that gives a proof, unless, of course, they got it wrong, but I doubt it. That was in the papers in 1891 after its consecration. This is Haig's design for the seating in the chapel. You see the way that he's matched up the rows according to where the doors are. Obviously, there's the cloisters, and you know, he's actually only done one side, but you can see the way it's done beautifully there. And move on. Now you can see the detail. I mentioned at the beginning that the theme running through the chapel was the praise of God and Laus Deo. So in the Canticle of Creation, in the Canticle of Daniel, let every living thing praise the Lord. So you'll see here 4 finials. The finials are those ends of the pews, you know, and they sort of mount up into these examples of leaves. You know, now I'm not great on my flora, but you'll see various examples of leaf. You'll see what that statue is. That's actually Pope Celestine, who was the one who gave the order for St. Patrick to go to Ireland. And just below him, you'll see a line of carving, which again is leaves. And behind those coats of arms are also various different types of foliage. So that's the leaves, that's the foliage giving praise to God. Now, as I said, these finials, there's over 100 of them in the chapel at the end of each bench, and every one of them is different. Again, beautiful pieces of work. There's an example of the just the bench. It's not a great photograph, unfortunately, but you'll see the way. And it's very interesting that, you know, it's, as I said, carved in American oak. But you'll notice, if you've been in the chapel, and hopefully you will be at some stage if you haven't been already, that the steps into the pews, and, you know, sort of below the eye sort of line there, it's all in a pitch pine, very unvarnished, unworked, all the rest of it. They spent the money on what could be seen, rather than the you know, the boards and the kneelers kind of in front. So let's move on. The corbels. A corbel is a little piece that kind of juts out, which actually takes the support, takes the weight bearing of the ceiling. And this is one of the examples whereby the when we talk about the formation for the priesthood, the saints that are in the you know, in those on the edge of the benches or at the top of the pews, the stalls, are various saints associated with the education of seminarians and doctors of the church and patrons of dioceses and things like that. And this particular angel on this corbel has a dalmatic. Now there are 8 corbels on each side, and each of them carries, sorry, there's 7 corbels on each side, and each carries a symbol of one of the minor orders or major orders that are associated with a student's progression from the time they come into seminary until the time that they leave. Some of you will be familiar with the minor orders. This is pre-Vatican II, obviously. You had porter, you had exorcist, you had acolyte, you had subdeacon, deacon, priest, and bishop. And each of those, and this is obviously for a deacon. And if you look at the thing underneath, you'll see a small little scroll with some wording on it, Dalmatica Justitiae, and that is taken from the particular ceremony to ordain someone to the diaconate. And each of these sort of symbols has part of the ceremony associated with the particular ministry or order, as it was known. So this is the one here. It says, Induat te Dominus induento salutis et vestimento laetitiae et dalmatica justitiae circumdet te semper. May the Lord endow you with the garment of salvation, the vestment of joy, and may the dalmatic of justice ever encompass you. So that's what that says. And again, you know, this is one of the beauties of the chapel. I only found out these particular, I kind of had an idea, and then I had a great conversation one day with Monsignor Brendan Devlin, who's the former professor of French, a noted linguist, noted polyglot, I must say. So I asked him about it, and we kind of thought there must be some connection between that. I found a copy of the 19th century pontifical, which would have been used by bishops for these particular orders, and I found the words for each of those. But it was very interesting because Monsignor Devlin said that no one understood why Cardinal Dalton, when he became a bishop, took a particular motto. And then he realized it was the motto that he took was one of the ones that was on the corbels of the college chapel, which would have been opposite where he would have sat when he was president of the college. So anyway, all these things kind of tie up. But again, it's a chapel that just keeps on giving in terms of its detail and all the rest of it. Stations of the Cross. Now, the Stations of the Cross were painted by an artist called Westlake, English artist. They are quite similar to the pre-Raphaelites. If any are familiar with the works of Holman Hunt or Millais or Dante Gabriel Rossetti, they're not dissimilar. They're by no means pre-Raphaelites, and Westlake wasn't one of the pre-Raphaelite painters. But you can see that sense of realism within them, and in some of the figures, they very much mirror the pre-Raphaelite, especially within the faces. And there's one, Mary Magdalene is portrayed with very long red hair, which is similar to one of the Elizabeth, I want to say Elizabeth Siddal, I can't remember now just offhand, who was Millais' muse, or Millais' wife, and Dante Gabriel Rossetti's muse. But anyway, they're very, very similar in that sense. But Westlake was an English artist, jobbing. He ran a company, an ecclesiastical furnituring, in the sense that not only did he do painting, but he also did stained glass, and, you know, probably would have, you know, there would have been people there making furniture and all these things. These companies, some of them in England, you know, which grew up to service Catholic parishes and Catholic dioceses after Catholic emancipation, And when, you know, a lot of this work had died out during the period of penal times and during the period of Reformation and that, so they would have, you know, gone back into sort of a lot of this work would have started up again. So anyway, so Westlake was given the contract to present, and what they are basically are paintings painted on canvas and then attached to the wall to make it look like frescoes. It's kind of ersatz fresco, if you like. But the effect is, and they are huge. I mean, they are really, they're really, really big. If you haven't seen them before, they're very, very big in the context of the chapel, taking up, you know, literally the whole sort of section of the panels above the stalls. And the names of, you can see there on the one on the left hand side, you can see the names of the various donors. Because as well as it being built from the pennies of the poor, it was also built by donations and subscriptions, and, you know, various bishops and lay people and all the rest of it paying for windows and for various other parts of the of the chapel. But we'll see some of Westlake's work a little later on as well. So the stained glass windows, they were done in 3 batches. Well, sorry, that's I suppose the wrong way of saying it. There are 3 sets of artisans involved. The first lot were done by Meyer of Munich. The first 3, if you stand at the very top of the chapel with your back to the reredos of the altar, the first 3 on the left-hand side were done by Meyer of Munich. Meyer of Munich were indeed are still a very important stained glass artist studio in Germany, in Munich. They're still in existence, but it was catalogued. So, for instance, I'm a parish priest here. Where I am at the moment is in my parish, as well as teaching in Manuth. I also have a parish here in Wicklow, very near Ockram, a little place called Annacurra, a little place of heaven called Annacurra. And so I decided I want a window. So I have the Meyer of Munich catalogue, and I say, okay, my window's this dimensions. I want to have, say, an Immaculate Conception window, or I want to have St. Bridget's window because it's called St. Bridget's Parish. And so I send off my money and my dimensions and all the rest of it, and then so many weeks later or so many months later, the window arrived. It was a catalogue, and you looked through the catalogue. However, that doesn't mean to say that the glass wasn't of the highest quality, and it was. And even today, the Meyer of Munich windows that are in the College Chapel, I think, are by far, in terms of colour and in terms of the way that the light is refracted through the windows, I think are far superior to any of the other windows. And anyway, that's just my opinion. But anyway, so they were the 3. The others were Lavers and Westlake. Here we have Westlake of the Station of the Cross again, a company that he had. It's a very interesting story. Lavers and Westlake were in with the Pugins at one stage, and I'd love if God have had time to go through the history to find out what happened, how they fell out, and what happened, and all the rest of it. Because Lavers were in with Pugins and Westlakes, and they were all sort of in around the same time. But anyway, and the last company were Cox Buckley. Now, each of those were foreign. Lavers and Westlake were London. Cox Buckley were London, although they founded, they established, I should say, a foundry in, I want to say Fermoy, but I don't think it's not Fermoy. It won't come to me now. I should be beginning as I get older to write these things down. Anyway, they founded they established a foundry in Cork, which only closed maybe 30, 40 years ago. And again, they provided windows, but they also provided quite a number of other parts of the chapel as well. Now, the stained glass windows followed the life of Christ from the Immaculate Conception, the Annunciation, and the Visitation, the first 3 panels. There you can see, you'll see that's interesting. That window there on the left-hand side is actually taken from my rooms in Maynooth. and it's actually backwards. That's the first window there. But it was one night, there was something on the college chapel, and I took the photograph from my rooms, which is on the second floor of the St. Patrick's building. So there you see the Visitation, in the middle you see the Annunciation, and then just covered by the thing there, you see the Immaculate Conception. It should actually be the other way around. So that begins the life of Christ, and then it goes on to Nativity and the finding of the child Jesus in the temple, right through along to his public ministry. And then the final windows, which are in the apse around the sanctuary, are the last kind of events, if you like, in the life of Christ. Now, and here's a couple of them. You'll see here the main window. When you see the whole window there, you can see that's the Nativity. That's one of the one of the Meyer of Munich windows. And you'll see the bottom picture, but then above it, you'll see what's called a sexfoil, which is a six-sided window, if you like, sexfoil, six-leaf almost. And what they did was they took the Old Testament precedents for the stories in the New Testament. And here we have the finding of Moses in the bulrushes by Pharaoh's daughter. So you have the Nativity of Jesus, and above it you have the story of Moses. If you go to the Sistine Chapel in Rome, now, you know, you've got Michelangelo on the ceiling and on the back wall, but one thing that's often forgotten about are the paintings that are above the sort of the, you know, on the walls, you know, kind of below the Michelangelo paintings, and they're by some of the most incredible and brilliant of the Renaissance painters. And on one side is the life of Christ, and the other side is the life of Moses. Iconographically, those two have always been matched. In the college chapel in Manuth, they decided to mix it up a bit, because remember, stained glass windows were used almost like the illiterate prayer book. You know, if you couldn't read the story of Nativity, well, you could watch that, you could look at the window, you could contemplate, you could see the figures, and you could see the shepherds and Mary and Joseph and the baby and the angels and all the rest of it. And, you know, so you could tell the story from that. In the college chapel, where it was seminarians, well, they were supposed to be a little more literate as well, so they mixed up. So they didn't just use the life of Moses, they used other images as well. Here, for instance, is an example. This is the Holy Family in Nazareth. This is the fourth window. Fourth window. Holy Family in Nazareth. And above it, you have the family of Tobit. My next project is to get a pair of binoculars or a long-range camera, and to photograph all the little quotations. The two quotations that the angels are holding, and then the one above it, which is about the family of Tobit. So again, rather than sticking with Moses, they looked at other Old Testament precedences for the windows. Let's move on. This is the rose window, which is above the organ, and this was paid for by two of the college professors. Obviously, they paid them more in those days than they do now. Gargan and Malloy. I'm joking, by the way, in case the president is listening. So Gargan and Malloy paid for this window. They could have come from a wealthy Catholic family. There's no reason to think that they mightn't have, or their family paid for it, or whatever it may be. But anyway, and it's a stunning window. It is Christ as the Pantocrator in the middle. And then you have the archangels around him, you have the apostles and the prophets, and above it you have St. Peter and St. Paul. And above it at the very, very top, the apex, that what would be quinfoil window, you have the diagrammatic representation of the Trinity, Deus est, Deus non est, as it were. Okay. And so that's the window, and it's very, very similar in its design to the great rose windows of various cathedrals around Europe, but this one was done actually by Cox Buckley, as was the organ case. I'll come to the organ in a few minutes, but as was the organ case, and as you can see, they designed the organ case to fit around the window. So you'll see it there. Now, the ceiling, going back again to the idea that the ceiling, we're talking about the ceiling had, you know, we talked about the praise of God. And above on the ceiling, there is a continuous line. Let me go on to the next picture. A continuous line of angels. And the first part of that are the angels carrying instruments of the Passion, and then angels carrying various sort of titles. You can see the key row, the first 3/2 letters of the word Christos, and various kind of emblems associated with the name of God or of Christ. And then you have various saints. You have various ranks of Irish saints: missionary, monastic, and pastoral. So monastic, you have the likes of Kieran of Clonmacnoise. Missionary, you have the likes of Columbanus. I was very delighted to show, actually, if you look at the picture there, at the very the bottommost row that you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sixth square from the left-hand side is St. Killian of Wurzburg. And St. Killian of Wurzburg, the protomartyr for the Diocese of Wurzburg. And I was able to show the Bishop of Wurzburg his first bishop on the ceiling of our chapel a number of years ago. And then you have the pastoral saints, people like St. Bridget and St. Patrick. You also have you have a Pope Celestine who sent St. Patrick to Ireland. And then you at the very, very end, just as you can see, kind of the middle of the picture, the two windows kind of are the two panels facing each other, one in blue above and one in pink below, are the guardian angels, which are particularly suitable for. And the idea was, if you can have a look at it here, this is St. Joseph on the left-hand side. Then you have St. Patrick. And then below, one of my favorites, not a great picture, but it's one of my favorites, which is the symbol of the Passion, which is the betrayal of Judas, the kiss. Now, as you can see around the picture, the pictures were done by Westlake, and then they were gilded, and they were gilded by an artist called Mannix. And apparently the college weren't particularly happy with the amount of gilding, the amount of bling that was used. But anyway, they were gilded by Mannix. But around it, you can see et tu puer propheta altissimi, and that's part of the Benedictus, which is the Canticle of Zechariah. On the ceiling, around each of those are the words from the three canticles. The Canticle of Zechariah, blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel. The Canticle of Mary, the Magnificat from yesterday. My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. And the great Te Deum, the great hymn of praise. So that one there at St. Joseph, and you, little child, shall be prophet of God the Most High. So that's obviously referring to John the Baptist. So you see there with Joseph. And then, blessed qui habitant in domo tua Domine. Blessed are those who live in your house, O Lord, in saecula saeculorum, forever singing your praises. Saecula.
Sorry to interrupt, John. You've about 3 more minutes, okay?
Oh, God. Right, okay. Right, I'll rush then. Sorry about this. Okay. Anyway, there's the ceiling, and there's maybe a little better view of it. You'll see the various instruments of the Passion. Interestingly, Westlake did this is St. Joseph Catholic Church in Highgate, where he did something quite similar. Then the sanctuary, the altar, and the reredos. This is the sanctuary with the reredos, which is that canopy at the back, which shows which kind of, if you like, sort of borders the high altar, as it were. Now, the altar at the front, which was brought into the chapel, which was on the cloister, but it was brought into the chapel and used after the Second Vatican Council, was made by Cox Buckley. But interestingly enough, the panels, which you can see in the altar, and the 3 panels, 2 of which you can see in the ambo, were carved by this Petrus de Wispeler, a sculptor in Belgium, a Flemish sculpture. And I found some of his he came from a family of sculptors, so I haven't found any more about him, but as I say, I'm working on it. So so obviously these panels were used then to make this altar, as it were, and this altar was donated by the priests of Dublin in memory of a particular priest. This is a beautiful sort of marble carving, and this plinth, you can see it there in the main part there behind the cross, was used for the exposition, the 40 Hours exposition, and there's actually a monstrance in the sacristy for that. The four statues, you can see them there around the high altar, are the four patrons of the four archdioceses, and anybody from Tuam knows that that's St. Jarlath with his broken wheel. It was consecrated, this particular reredos, by Manuth after he was ordained Coadjutor Archbishop of Melbourne in the College Chapel in 1812. The panels in the apse are the 6 saints of Ireland: Lawrence of Tulle, St. Bridget, St. Malachy, St. Columbanus, and St. Columkill. And then the ceiling of the sanctuary has the apostles and the patriarchs and the evangelists. The Lady Chapel, which was the last part of the chapel to be done, this is a beautiful photograph that was done by, was taken by Paula T. Nolan, who was the photographer and the designer on the book that I co-edited with Salvador Ryan last year, We Remember Maynooth. She took this incredible picture. And it wasn't finished until the 1920s, but interestingly enough, it took them a long time to work out how to stop the water coming in, because it used to be constantly damaged. And it took nearly 100 years to work that out, but eventually now it is in the state, in the current state of restoration, and it's beautiful. And these are the 4 paintings, there's 5 of them actually altogether, 4 of them that were done by Clark Studios. You can see similarities. That's a window by Harry Clark, and you can see a similarity in the faces, as it were, that kind of very angular chin, and you know, which was similar. We don't know, they're certainly not by Harry Clark. As such, they're probably apprentices' pieces, are done by one of the people in the studio, but obviously not, you know, not done by him. One of my regrets was that Nicola Gordon Bow, who was the great writer on Harry Clark's work, never got to see them. We were trying to organize a visit for her to come out to see them in the chapel, but sadly she died there 2 years ago, so was unable to see them. The organ, originally built by Stahlhut. I know I'm going over, but I'm nearly done. Originally built by Stahlhut, a German company from Paderborn. Henry Willis then rebuilt it in the 1920s. Henry Willis, who was the organ builder for the organ in, any of you who are following the proms at the moment, the organ for the organ in the Royal Albert Hall at the moment. It was then redone by Kenneth Jones in the 1970s, and then a complete rebuild by the Fratelli Ruffati from Padua only in the last number of years. There's Haig's design for the casing of the chapel, of the organ, and then you'll see some of the work that the Ruffati brothers sent to us when we were doing the book last year. The largest pipe, this is a tradition of the Ruffati brothers, I'm not too sure it's a tradition of all organ builders, the largest pipe in the organ was always inscribed with the name of the person who had commissioned the organ, and in this case you'll see in the bottom left hand side Monsignor Hugh Connolly, who was president at the time. And that is pretty much it. There it is, St. Patrick's. Oh yeah, some of the great visitors to the college. This is the Empress of Austria, Sisi, the King and Queen of Spain, John Henry Newman, Pope St. John Paul II, St. Teresa of Calcutta, Prince Rainier and Princess Grace used to come and would come for Mass in the chapel when they were visiting the Carton. And this is one I found very recently. It's amazing what you find on eBay. It's a picture from one of the English newspapers of a visit to the chapel by King George V and Queen Mary, with probably the Archbishop of Dublin and Mannix there as well. But you can make out the reredos as it, that visit happened in 1911. The dimensions are there. And that's what it cost. It cost 25,000. The interiors cost 9,000. The tower and spire 14,000. So a total of about 48,000, which is equivalent of about 6.5 million today, but you wouldn't build what we have there for 6.5 million, I would imagine. Now, I think Elaine has passed this on to you, but there is a YouTube clip that I did for last year because it was the 225th anniversary of the college, and that YouTube clip or that YouTube film you can find on St. Patrick's College Maynooth YouTube page. All right, I'll stop the share. Apologies for going on. I tend to witter on far too long on one side and then kind of forget myself. Like I said, I used to, when I was a student in Rome, and I would have visitors out, I would say I could do the Vatican museums in 45 minutes, but I could also do them in 5.5 hours, and it was up to yourself as to how long you wanted them. So I could probably do it in 45 minutes, but I could probably spend, a good couple of hours in the chapel with you. And hopefully, please God, in the future, we'll have a chance to do that.
Definitely, that would be wonderful, and that presentation was absolutely tremendous, John Paul. Thank you so much on all our behalfs. I want to, before I take questions, because I'm conscious we've run over time and people have started to leave, I do want to formally thank you for such a wonderful presentation to open Heritage Week. I also want to thank all the people who've joined us here today, and I want to thank Elaine, who's organised all that. So without further ado, we'll take some questions. Now, there are some in the chat box, and I'll try to take the ones that are actual questions. For example, we had one, sorry, now I just need to go back.
I'm looking at them here, actually.
How are you? Great.
I see wood came from Ireland for Westminster. That's correct, yes. The beams of, and they came from not very far from me here, the great oak forest of Coolatin. They were the timbers that were used in Westminster Abbey. We weren't on the college chapel, weren't able to pay. They had to get the wood from America. Original Westminster was a choir chapel, yes, but the college chapel in Manuth is the largest choir stall chapel in the world because it sits 454 students individually. I think bigger. The next one down from that is one of the chapels in one of the German cathedrals. When is the organ used? It's used, the chapel isn't used for liturgies very often at this stage, sadly, because there just isn't the numbers as regards to seminarians. It's used for it's used for the Easter ceremonies. It's used for the opening of the academic year. It's used for the graduations for St. Patrick's College Maynooth. And it's also used for the great carol services that has been part of the college over the last number of years. So one of the smaller chapels is used on a regular daily basis for the Liturgy of the Hours. So it's not, as a chapel, it's not used as often. And sadly, some of those statues in the on the woodwork were stolen a number of years ago. So unfortunately, that's why the chapel is kept locked at the moment, because of that. I'm trying to think, is there any other? I saw Dalmatica, but where is the rest of the quote? Are the words? No, the Dalmatica Justitia is just what's on the thing. And then I surmise from that the actual prayer that came from the pontifical. So in each of those corbels, it's just a small little quotation that's on the corbel. And then that, as I said, led me back to finding the actual prayers in the pontifical. Is there a list of the pictorial panels on the ceiling? No, that's when eventually I would hope to do that at some stage. My real desire is to do a proper and concise sort of history and sort of description of the chapel, kind of coffee table size. That's what I'm working towards. And hopefully at some stage we'll be able to do that, so that there is a list of the panels, there's a list of the saints and all these sort of things, and there are various places. One of the places you'll find a lot of that stuff is in Monsignor Patrick Corish's bicentennial history of the college. He put a lot of that, he actually got one of them wrong, but apart from that, it's a pretty accurate account of the building of it also, and also some of the details that are in it. Yeah. Any other questions?
John, you're mute.
Can I just show you something?
Ailish, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Here's the book that was brought out for the first centenary
All
in
right.
1895. Now look at the size of it, like, you know.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic one to have, and it's got the I suppose the plate you were talking about for the beginning of the chapel, the actual, suppose, size it was meant to be. You know, fantastic.
Yeah.
You know?
That's right.
Yeah,
That comes from
yeah,
that. Yeah. You look as if you have the deluxe version, Ailish. There were two editions. There was a limited edition done, and that was in a kind of a burgundy color. That one obviously is, that's obviously been rebound. It was a much bigger one, exact same, but just the paper was thicker. And then there's the one I have. I have the less expensive one, which is the one with the green cover on it.
All right.
But the those ones you can still get the limited edition one from time to time. But
I got this in the 80s.
Oh yeah. You can buy them in the 80s. You can't buy them anymore, unfortunately.
Exactly.
Yeah. Could you send us the link to the YouTube presentation? Yeah, Elaine will do that. And there's a 3D walkthrough online. If I don't know who said that, but if whoever it is, maybe you could just put the detail of that on it. I know there is some of it. Yeah. But I'm not too sure where exactly one might be able to find that. I will indeed. That's great. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Just enjoying it. It's great enjoyment.
You've been in it loads of times, Ailish, though, haven't you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I grew up in Manuth, like.
I know that.
So, so therefore, I mean, I grew up in the chapel. I was lucky, and my father went very regularly to Vespers.
Right.
And I went with him. So I was up in the organ loft with him for Vespers. Fantastic to be up there. You know, it was a great place to be, you know, kind of thing. Huge in history, you know, kind of thing, which I love, you know, kind of thing.
But none of your family worked at Manuth, Ailish?
No.
Which was unusual in one sense, because there was a lot of families and, you know, jobs of, I suppose, you know, people came in, you know, when they left school and started working in the college in various different ways. There was a lot of families who grew up in Manuth, who were, you know, who worked in the college.
We were very lucky as well when they were doing up the parish church that we were in the college. So we got, from my point, we got to sing there every week, which was beautiful.
Yeah, it's very funny, Elaine, because I tend to, you know, I show my students around it. Well, I did up until last year, but I show my students around it, and invariably the question comes, can we get married here? And you know, to get married in the chapel, you'd want to have about 400 guests, you know, because you'd really need to fill it, you know, for it to be. I mean, it would be an incredible aisle, I'm sure, to walk down or to walk up or down or whatever. Right? But anyway, so the girl said, you know, can we get married here? And I said, you know, not unless you give the president an indecent amount of money, you know, I said jokingly. So anyway, that was grand, and we passed on. And as we were leaving, she said, how indecent would it have to be? So I said, no. I said, but the interesting thing was that at the time it was used as the parish church, there were quite a number of weddings, but it's not like, say, the chapel at Trinity College where it's used for weddings. It's not, I mean, I'm not too sure. I honestly don't know whether any weddings have happened. There have been a few baptisms. Interestingly enough, one of the and that was one of my colleagues. He and his wife have had 2 children since they came to Maynooth, and both have been baptized in the college chapel. John O'Keefe's son was baptized at a Holy Saturday night, and indeed his grandson was baptized on Holy Saturday night. So so from that point of view, but I don't think, apart from the time it was used, it was from the time it was used as a parish church. I noticed here, I'm from Louth, so disappointed that the RD link to the interior pews of the actual chapel has been disproved, but also interesting. Thanks for, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know who sent that, but yeah. Now, in saying that, the work that is in, I don't have a picture of the, let's see if I, as I'm talking to you, I'll see if I can find it really quickly. I did find a number of years ago in the archive something of the designs of the. I'm just trying to see if I can find them really quickly. Something of the designs for the interiors of, yeah, I found one here. Let me just put it the right way around, and I'll see if I can share this with you. So the work that the Mohans did, here it is here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's part of the elevation of the these were Haig's designs. They're part of the elevation of the benches that were in the college chapel. See if I can find something else here now, because I have some more of them. Yeah, this is the full one.
Sorry, there's another question there as well, John Paul. Is there a book on the great churches of Ireland?
On the great churches of Ireland, there is one on the medieval churches. I'm not too sure the name of the author. I have it downstairs, but I'm not too sure. But no, I tell you, anyway, that's part of the that's again part of the elevation that Haig did. You can see his signature there is stamped. No, I honestly don't know, and that's not giving you a short answer. What I do know is the fact that a number of years ago, quite a number of the dioceses of Ireland produced, I think it was around the time of the millennium, produced you know, sort of books on their diocese, and you know, the various churches in the diocese were you know, referred to and all the rest of it. But as there was, is there any? No, I really don't know. It tends to be just, you know, individual churches as such. You know, and I mean, there is a booklet that was done a number of years ago, an excellent booklet on the college chapel. Any of you who are living in Manuth, it's available in the bookshop. It's also available in the conference center there, just on the arch on the left hand side as you're heading in the main gate of the college. The arch there, but you know, it's, as I said, it's excellent. It's an excellent description of the college chapel. Any other? No, I just on. Sorry, I'm just going to unshare my screen there. Stop share.
Well, if there's nothing else, perhaps we'll wrap up at this stage. I think the fact we ran over is indeed a testament to how interesting everybody found this. And I think we could talk for a lot longer about it indeed. So hopefully we will be having that face-to-face tour of the college chapel. So thanks again, everybody. Bye now.
Thanks very much, Alan. Thank you.
Thank